21 News, your place for politics. This is Decision 2024.
The presidential candidates are back on the campaign trail after the second apparent assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life. And Kamala Harris sits down for a big interview with the National Black Association of Journalists. Now, Trump is heading back to his rally schedule. We had a busy week in politics, and our Decision 2024 political panel is back to go over it all. And as we mentioned last time, we are including more local voices from our community so that we can get more perspective. We're expanding this panel with new faces and some familiar ones. So joining me today, some new faces that are joining us for the panel. This time around, we have Tracy Winbush. She's a political consultant, also known as a former Mahoney County Board of Elections board member and former treasurer of the Ohio Republican Party, among other titles. And next to her, joined with us now, is Jalada Aslam. She is the president of the Youngstown Warren Black Caucus, former vice chair of the Mahoney County Democratic Party, and former coalition's director for the Biden-Harris campaign back in 2020. So she's been on the ground too. Both women very involved in politics. And to my right, 21 News analyst and assistant news director Justin Mitchell. So thank you all for being here. A lot to go over, a busy week again in politics. And I want to start with the candidates getting back on the trail. We had that second apparent assassination attempt against Trump. While that investigation is still unfolding and charges are filed, what could be some of the concerns and impact on security when it comes to the candidates on both sides? Tracy, I'll start with you. How could this change things? We're near battleground. Well, we're in battleground Pennsylvania within this news market.
Well, we need to realize that no former president has ever run for president and not been seated. So usually your former presidents have a scaled down Secret Service, and no one's really paying attention to their security in that measure because they're not active. President Trump and Vice President Harris, she has a full detail because she's still sitting. Former President Trump is a former president, but he's seeking re-election. This is the first time in history that they've done this, and so this is unknown because you usually don't have to have this kind of security for your non-seated opponent.
And are you worried that maybe this could interrupt rallies, campaign stops, interaction with the voters? What do you think?
I think it could affect interaction with the voters. One of the things that I'm really excited about, and I'm happy on both sides of the aisle, is that they are determined not to let this stop them. And so, it is important for voters to be able to have access to the candidates when they're out. Shaking the hands and somebody looking you directly in the eye really does mean something to a potential voter. So I'm glad of that. But I just wanted to piggyback on something that Tracy said, is that actually former President Trump, you're right, has to scale back, but he should have been scaled up as the nominee.
Mm-hmm. Again, they should have done that.
They should have.
But again, in hindsight, it was never done before because you never had a former president running for president against a sitting president.
Got you. All right, so we've definitely got some changes here. Now, both sides are pointing to the rhetoric, blaming voter division, attempts on the assassination for the rhetoric. What's your message and your take on the tone that these campaigns have taken on, especially over the cycles? Because we went over them, how it goes back all the way to how we compared Bush Gore, Bush Kerry, Obama McCain, Obama Romney, Trump Hillary. We saw, maybe it stepped up a little bit with Trump entering the picture. Tell me what you think about the tone, though. Should it tone down?
It should tone down. I don't know that it is, but it really should tone down on both sides. People take things personal. And when they feel like they're invested in a campaign or invested in a candidate, they start to take that stuff really personal. And unfortunately, there are people out there that think the louder you are, the more that people will listen to you, the more votes you'll get. That's not necessarily true. Voters are smarter than people think they are. You screaming at me is not going to make me want to vote for you.
You want to hear details.
I want to hear details.
Yeah,
I want to know where you stand on the issues.
Right. And Tracy, what do you think about the tone and the rhetoric? I mean, both of you have worked on the ground with voters, campaigns, candidates. How can this ever shift?
The tones of the campaigns have disintegrated since 2000. And people are more emotionally engaged, but not thoughtfully engaged. So instead of them going after the actual platforms and of the mechanisms that makes a country great, we've gone after sensationalism, and social media has played into it. and it gets people fired up, and they say things, and then you see people on the street, and then they act them out, because people are not being logical in their thought processes.
And do you think, Justin, from a news perspective, is it more about that, all-important soundbite that goes viral on the social medias and is everywhere? Or do you think it's a mix of a little bit of everything?
I think it's definitely a mix, because it's something that can be exploited by certain politicians, but it's also felt, Tracy mentioned that it's been this way since roughly 2000, and that's definitely true, and it's especially true since 2001. We just had the anniversary of 9/11.
Right.
After 9/11, you hear a lot of people talk about this moment of national unity we had, but that was actually, if you remember correctly, something somewhat limited, that unity. That was unity among specifically Americans who looked a certain way. There was also this desire for revenge, certainly well-founded, but it created a schism where now people were angry and wrapped in symbolism and slogans, but policy went out the window with some voters, and it became, I'm afraid, and every election is an existential crisis now, and every campaign can exploit that feeling and make it the other side isn't human, they're not American, they will destroy this country, that kind of heightened rhetoric. And it really does go back at least that far. Bush v. Gore was the last boring election, and that was not a boring election when all was said and done, right?
Oh, yeah.
Everyone since then, you have people thinking that the fate of the nation depends upon what happens in November. And sometimes it's been true to some extent, but the world won't blow up the day after most elections.
And from that point forward.
Right.
And let's look at some of the issues, because now that we've talked about the tone and what's happening
Can I
on the
comment
trail.
on what he
Oh,
said?
sure. Go ahead. Yes.
Because, and I know we're talking about elections contributing to the political divisiveness, but I think it's also what's happening in between. And nobody wants to have a real conversation about when things got really bad, in regards to what side of the aisle you were on. After America elected its first black president, okay, the hatred got real. And there seemed to be people who feared that having someone of color in the most powerful seat in the world was going to, for some reason or another, change the country in a negative way, that this was going to hurt their lifestyle. And it began to get really, really nasty. I mean, some of the things that we saw, depicting him as a monkey or insulting the first family, that was just, to me, that was over the top. And that wasn't just because of a presidential cycle. This was going on in between the elections.
So within society.
But
we're
can I just
go
to
ahead.
add to what you're saying, we need to also look at the elements of distribution. The Obama administration may have been the target, but social media was on the forefront where we could actually see stuff in real time. So you had means of distribution that we were never
Social media
allowed
and
to see before,
and the
because I
24
couldn't
cycle,
connect.
And the 24
for
cycle
the
news cycle.
And so you're looking,
Right.
and
Yeah.
you're looking at all these elements at the same time.
Right.
So that they weren't new, but they were manifested, they were distributed. The same thing is with school shootings. We see things happening more and more regularly than they did from the Columbine shooting, when we were all sitting there going, "Oh my God!"
Right.
It's almost a second attempt on President Trump's life, versus the first attempt. It went from one all-day cycle to, 15 minutes. They tried to shoot him again, and we went to the next story. And we have to not become desensitized. But that's what's wrong with America and American politics today.
And a lot of
because we're dealing with sensationalism and not with what's in front of us.
Right.
And there are a lot of issues to break down within this election, too. So let's turn to Kamala Harris, because she did a sit-down interview with the National Association of Black Journalists on Tuesday. And she focused on, where she stood on some issues. She stuck to her message, though, primarily what we heard within the debate. That's what the articles, Political and others are reporting on. Pointer did kind of a fact check on her, too. So there's more there to it. She talked about her support for Israel and said it has the right to defend itself following the Hamas attacks in October of last year. She said that she touched on the economy, earning the black male vote, health concerns for the black community. So Kamala is criticized for not maybe going far enough into specifics, but do you think that she needs to go anywhere more in depth on some of those issues to reach to the voters? What are you hearing from voters?
Here's what I know is really a delicate balance. Remember, she's a sitting vice president. to a president who's still in office. And so you can respond to things, but what you don't want to do, I mean, she has to balance it. What you don't want to do is say something that's totally away from a position that your boss has. So should she be more specific? I don't think so. I think it's going to be difficult for her to do that. I think people want to know specifics on economic issues.
Okay.
But because we're all paying more. I paid less money for gas yesterday and almost did a jig at the gas station.
Yeah.
Seriously,
Yeah.
because, all of a sudden I use mid-grade and I literally paid $3.19 a gallon. I was thrilled. But, we're all facing that, no matter what your economic circumstance is. So I think that people do care about the specifics, but I also think that there's another piece that we keep telling people about, and that is what does the future look like for me, for my family, for my community. And I think that she does a really good job on when she talks about that. And I think when you meet voters where they are and you talk about things they care about, and I'm not saying some of these other issues aren't real. The border is an issue and all this. But honestly, when we talk to voters, I do a lot of work in the African American community. Most Black voters will tell you they're not worried about the border. Not if it's not going to affect their life. Now, if it affects their life and their livelihood or their income, then it's different. But, and I think that's true not just for her, but even for the Republican nominee. I get it. People want to be sensational. But really, is that going to change my life?
Yeah.
How is that going to help
With
me?
the kitchen table issues.
Right.
Tracy, do you agree?
No, I don't. And I'll say it this way. Devastation will blow your mind. And right now, the border, it doesn't affect me because I don't see it, but it affects me because I know that there are services and resources that I know that are desperately needed inside of the Mahoning County area that are being extenuated to services for people who are coming in because they want to be American also. And I'm not mad about them wanting to be American, but I believe charity begins at home and sheds abroad. And right now in America, we have so many problems and we keep adding to them and not fixing them. It's not like, we never thought that the crisis in 2020, we never thought we would see a shutdown like we did. But we now know crisis can be real in America. And if that be the case, we need to start making the hard decisions and hearing from the candidate. And and don't get me wrong, both of them could do a whole lot better articulating what's in black and white inside the platform books. Both of them. I don't think either one of them have read it. But both of them carry the same football. And when I look at security and I look at Border Patrol, it seeks high up on the list, but even though the economy is very, very high. But if I don't have a land and I don't have a home and I don't feel safe, then I don't need the money that I need. But I need to make sure that the dollar stays strong. We need foreign leadership. Vice President Harris, she believes in a two-state solution for Israel. I don't. My candidate doesn't. Those are real topics that they should be talking about. One believes that they should be giving out more money and doing it a certain way. Another one doesn't. Those are the issues that I want to hear. I want to hear, what are you going to do? I could care less about all of the hoopla that we're getting. And I think that's where America sits.
And to that end, from a journalist perspective, the media has to get better at issues. You just named a bunch of issues that reasonable minds can have a discussion about.
Both of you did.
And you and Gelada, you did too, and Lindsay, you named several while we set up this question. But there's so much focus, particularly in national media and particularly on social media and the 24-hour cycle, that is focused on the latest bombshell. And it can be exploited also. I mean, when we talk about immigration, spreading misinformation about people eating dogs is not a discussion about immigration.
Exactly.
And we should be having that discussion, but the media ought to be asking those questions also and ignoring the red meat. You don't have to always bite on the red meat. You don't have to pay attention. It's got oxygen. It's a fire that spreads because there's oxygen. And there's also not always the same standard here. I mean, yeah, Kamala Harris's policy positions might be somewhat vague. There are several policy positions, but I don't see the same I don't see the same standard applied to when Donald Trump, for almost a decade now, has been 2 weeks away from a health care plan. And that's also a legitimate issue that affects people. We need to talk issues more and red meat less.
And that's what we're going to do now, because we are going to dive even deeper with
Well,
women.
we used
Yeah.
to. Before
Yes.
sensationalism, we
Right.
talked policy.
Right.
We talk. I mean,
Yes.
the old days, kind of. You know, there was more focus on not just policy, but how much money was spent on those issues. There were real conversations, and we don't do that anymore. When was the last time someone talked about the deficit?
Oh my God! Did you see the clock? The money is almost.
Crickets.
We've almost run on
you
a
go.
billboard.
Exactly.
I mean, like
Yeah.
we don't
what
even
deficit?
mention
That $35
it.
trillion
And I
in
got
counting?
for real.
And
the
we agree.
It used to be the Republican Party's issue.
It is a
They
problem.
would call you to account. I mean, that was like, Democrats, you're spending too much money. We need to do something about the deficit.
That's true.
You don't hear them talk. It's not even a conversation.
I think everyone wants to spend money now.
Not now.
But here's the deal. We're going to go into the issues, is what I mean, though. So I looked at some surveys on women voters, because I do believe women are getting highlighted in a lot of studies, so it's not something we should be ignoring. NBC is highlighting a new national survey by the YWCA, finds Gen Z women voters consider issues like cost of living, healthcare, and gun violence as their top issues of importance. A little different from some of the male voters. Also, there's a big gap on abortion. 66% of women say they trust Harris on abortion. 39% of women say they trust Trump. So women are kind of, they're out there, they're voting for sure. They have a voice, but are the candidates recognizing it? What are you hearing from the women on the ground, the voters that you're tapped into?
I'm going to be honest with you. And this kind of, it's almost like when people say, what do black voters want? Women are not a monolith. There are conservative women, there are liberal women, there are progressive women, there are a whole lot of women in the middle. A lot.
Oh, wow.
And we are concerned about, and not to say that I'm just one of those stuck in the middle, but we are concerned about the basics. How do I take care of my family? Am I able to make a decent living? If I get sick, am I not 2 minutes away from bankruptcy? These are real issues. Am I going to be able to afford my home? Am I going to be able to go on a vacation? And can I retire with dignity? Can I make decisions about family planning? It's not just about abortion. For me, it's about family planning. It's about what size and when I'm going to have a family. And if for some reason I'm not extremely fertile, okay, and I have problems, am I going to have the ability to get services, to get fertility treatments? All of those are real issues that women care about. Now, again, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, I think that candidates need to do a better job of listening to women instead of just telling women what they want to hear.
And what do you think, Tracy?
I think they need to start listening to America and to the people. Women, men, we want to be separate, but we want to be equal. You can't have it both ways. And we're all supposed to be one United States of America, to where we agree to disagree, but we still want the same objective, which is to have a family, to have our families be safe, to let them have economic stability, have growth, have education. Both of us sitting here at this table think totally different, but we both want the same outcome. And they should be able to sit down and have this conversation and still be able to have a glass of water afterwards, after listening to the constituents and hearing women voters. We're all different. Black voters, we're all different. And we need to think individually. But America doesn't want us to think individually because they want us to think collectively their way. And when I think different from you, then we're enemies. It's okay for her to wear black and for me to wear a multicolored dress.
Right.
We're different people, but we still want the same outcome.
Yeah, and there's a lot of issues, like you said, that are not getting attention.
None.
Yeah, I mentioned last time healthcare. As parents, we're worried about childcare. We're worried about healthcare for them and education. The list goes on and on and on.
Right.
And I'm wondering, because we were talking about how engaged the voters are this time around. I mean, we've kind of seen this story before. Now we have Harris instead of Biden in the mix, so it's a little different than last time for sure. But we've been in this situation before. Are the voters as engaged as they were last time, this past election cycle? How do you really gauge that? What are you noticing, Gelada?
I am an on-the-ground kind of girl, okay? I always say, my roots are in field work or in, voter conversations. I love door-to-door conversations. I love what's going on the phone. I want to be able to talk to voters in their space, regardless of whether I'm running the field, whether I'm consulting, whether I'm a senior advisor, whether I'm working on a national or a state campaign. I think that's everything. And voters are engaged. They are excited. They see something different. It is not just about whether or not the VP is a Democrat or a female. They see something different because for the last 6 to 8 years, we've been talking about two old white guys. You know, and listen, I know Joe Biden. I love my president. I've had probably more conversations with him with any other national figure. But the reality is, we've been talking about two old white guys for so long that people are like, something different, something new.
And is that a vibe maybe that you're getting, and maybe also Tracy, you're getting about this election cycle? Kind of, if you go back to when Obama first ran, it was hope and change. People wanted a change from the tone of what we were going through with the Bush administration. We had, been to war. It was a darker time at that time. People wanted a different message. You kind of felt the energy in the room in those moments at the beginning.
Not even close.
No?
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Obama,
totally disagree.
2008, when President Obama came on the scene against Hillary Clinton in that February in Springfield, he split up everybody.
In the primary?
In the primary.
Okay.
And the crescendo that he had, because at first no one thought he was going to make it, and Hillary didn't claim it. Stephanie Tubbs Jones didn't transfer over. A lot of them didn't come over. Tavis Smiley didn't come over. But all of a sudden, this man got a train, and that we looked at it and said, "Oh no." Vice President Harris does not have the same inertia. She doesn't have the same fire. Now, maybe some women, maybe some women, and some people are, but from what I can see, the energy that should be there, that could be there, is not there for her, even though this race is very energetic.
So then how do you feel about the Trump campaign and how that's going so far as we're just weeks away? Is the energy still there? And
the Trump campaign keeps on shifting because with every attempt, it changes shifts.
Yeah.
And it changes gears. And we can't get a sense on it because we can't get our pulse on it. But it's still moving forward because the mechanisms are different. There's two different horses, two different mechanisms of how they're getting there. But the drive that the Democrat Party had in 2008 and the drive that they have today, I don't compare because people were singing songs about Obama. They were making T-shirts in high schools. It was insane. I was like, oh my God. He was raising money, knew we couldn't keep up. It was like, what is going on here?
Raising money.
But there's a major difference in infrastructure and messages because President Trump's, his gears are still going forward because he's not losing anyone.
And Justin, if you want to piggyback, because we had Paul Sarasic, YSU political science professor, on at 5 this past week, and he was talking about the rally around the flag movement and how every time there's an attempt on a candidate's life, that gets the voters riled up. Could we see that reflected in the vote, because we are just 2.5 weeks away from early voting in person in Ohio?
You know what's really tough to say about that is because you did start to see it after the first attempt in PA.
Right.
But what's difficult to say about that is a number of things, not least of which is the candidate himself and the fact that outreach to other people is not something he does well. Like Tracy just mentioned, he's not lost anybody. No, he's never lost anybody, but the gaining of people that he needs to get over the top, he's really not made any effort for it. I've talked about it on this panel before. Those people who were voting for Nikki Haley after she had dropped out were sending a message, and I've not seen him extend any olive branch to those kinds of Republicans. And by the way, I've seen Kamala Harris extend an olive branch to them. So that might negate some of that rally around the flag factor. But the other thing is there's only so many reachable voters. It's a small number, and it's hard to gauge what they do or don't want, but if they perceive the attempts on him as more chaos surrounding him, then even though he's the victim of it, he could actually be hurt by it with those voters because they go, oh, geez, it's more of this heightened thing around him. We just want to move forward as a country. And there's no real gauge on if those people are thinking that way or not.
And listen, may I add, right now, a lot of people are remaining silent. The polarization of the race that we've seen in the last 3 presidential cycles is keeping a lot of people with their votes to themselves. So the people that would normally have signs in their yard,
Oh, yeah, they're not
they
doing
may or
that.
might not have
They're not
signs in
doing
it.
that.
They're not putting out the Trump. They're not putting out the Harris sign.
They don't want people to
They
know.
don't want you to know. We're not talking about it over cocktails because I don't know where you are and you don't know where I am. And if I don't know, we can still be friends. Because if we have a political conversation, we may not be friends at the end of the night, and I don't want to lose your relationship.
Well, let's hope everyone can get along. We've got maybe several weeks, 7 weeks left, so we're almost there. Before we go,
But I've got to say this.
Yeah.
I think you're dead wrong about the vice president.
What about her?
The excitement level is not only at Obama level, it is above beyond
That's okay.
Obama level.
We can agree to
No,
disagree.
and I'm not even talking about where you're at in the political spectrum. I'm saying that I've had people reach out to me, call me, Facebook me, text me everywhere I go. You know, I've never done anything for anybody before, but please tell me what I can do to get her elected. And it's not just an anti-Trump thing. They really want to see somebody new. You know,
But do they know her?
really want to help her get elected. Do they know
But the
her?
question is, do they know her? Do they know her track record? Do they know her past?
Some people do.
Or is it just because she's a pretty woman?
Well, they didn't know.
Hold
They
on,
didn't,
hold
they
on,
didn't know
hold on.
President Obama.
Hold on. But this is 2.5 weeks. But they took a minute to get to Obama because
Look.
again, those of us that were political in the thick of things
Let's be
were trying
clear.
to find a way to
Let's
get to
be
Obama.
clear. I love number 44, but he had only been in the Senate 2 years when he ran for
Yeah,
president.
but when he ran,
So-
it took a minute from that February when he split up Tavis Smiley's State of the Black Union to the end of that cycle. There was a lot of people that he had to go find on that pathway and
Right,
pick up
right.
because he still didn't pick them up at the end, and we ain't heard from Tavis Smiley since.
Well, that's on Tavis.
okay, well, let's.
But
yeah.
her excitement is real. The numbers of people that we have offering to volunteer,
Okay.
to work on the IE side, to work on the campaign side, it is real. The money is coming in. You've seen the kind of money that she's raising. It is insane.
And what is the voter turnout, get out the vote movement look like on your end and on your end? I'll start with you because
Well,
you're on that now.
Yeah, I think what you're going to see is, a massive, ground game. You've already seen that they've got. Here's the sad part. Ohio's not on the map. Okay.
'Cause-
Ohio's not on the map. So we're getting ads because of our market. We reach into PA. Toledo's getting ads because they reach into Michigan.
Right.
So there was huge buys in the Youngstown and Toledo market. I knew about this 3 weeks ago, but it's not because Ohio's on the map.
No.
You
Yeah.
know.
And
So but even then, I'm telling you, there are people. I had neighbors come to me on Labor Day in the morning while I'm outside barbecuing saying, where did you get your Harris signs? I can't get my signs. What is the deal? Why can't we get any blah, 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 blah? Why are they just writing off Ohio? Because, they just assume that Trump is going to win it. There are a lot of people there. There are massive numbers of people volunteering, going to Democratic offices, making phone calls, writing postcards, etc. It is packed in there. So the excitement is real.
Well, and to that point, when you talk about Ohio not being on the map, and of course it's probably not. We know Ohio is a pretty red state now, but I can't help but point out that, or at least wonder that when you do get down to the ground game and turnout, it was just last year that you had two pretty liberal issues get nearly 60%
That's
in
right.
deep red Ohio
That's right.
because voters were motivated to do so, meaning that I would not sit here and predict that Harris could win Ohio, but the idea that it's miles out of reach is really unknown because we don't know how many new voters we have, but we know there's registrations that are up. We don't know what the ground game's going to be. And I see more Trump signs than I saw the last cycle, but I also see more Harris signs, and I see them in neighborhoods that are not going to go to the
Right.
Democratic
But let's
candidate.
try this. Signs don't vote.
No, sure they don't.
But let me get this out. Signs don't vote. But what you are going to see is because we have such a short span of time, and this election it's like a bad movie. You never know when the next scene's going to change and how fast.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in this situation, you can't count all your chickens before they hatch.
Sure.
And so that's why everyone has to go out and everyone has to make sure they're registered. They have to make sure that they know the issues and they have to make sure that they vote. Ohio is not all red. It has been purple. It can go purple. It can go blue. So nothing is guaranteed. But what America needs to do is understand the issues and the candidates. President Obama, Vice President Harris has shifted her position on several issues. Former President Trump has been consistently consistent, whether you like him or love them. But you need to make sure that you know who you're voting for and what you're voting for.
And Tracy, real quick, do you know what the get out the vote efforts will be like here in the Valley for the Republican Party?
Well, as they've always done, we have our early voting. They will have their rallies. But we are usually to the polls. We have poll workers. We have grassroots. We have door to door. But Republican and Democrat grassroots are different. We do a lot of phone calls. We do a lot of texting. They do a lot of knocking. They do a lot of other things. But our push is there.
And will there be maybe bus rides to the polls, do you think?
Absolutely.
Okay, so all of that
Absolutely.
infrastructure is still likely in place here
Oh,
in the Valley.
Absolutely. And then because it's a presidential election cycle, you have 2 weekends of voting.
Oh, that's
And
right.
so, right. And so you're going to see massive numbers. I was talking to someone from Sherrod Brown's campaign yesterday. His surrogates are going to start dropping in. So you're going to see national surrogates start
Correct.
coming in. Because the reality is, even though Ohio may not be considered on the map for the presidential election,
It is
we
in
are
play for
number
senatorial.
one for the Senate race.
Oh, yeah, everyone's
Correct.
watching this
So
razor
Senatorial
tight
race
race.
there.
you're going to start to
Right.
see.
But again, getting
yeah.
out to vote
Yeah.
and voting for your candidate and knowing your candidate and then voting down ticket.
Yeah, and I reached out to Mercer County's Board of Elections today. They told me that they are ready. They're seeing a lot of people, a lot of poll workers signed up, which is a good sign. They don't think they're going to have as long of a night as they had in 2020. They learned from some of that, and they see
Let's
a
hope.
lot of people.
Do they
I
have
know.
early voting?
They have
They do.
over-the-counter early mail-in voting that starts around the 14th in Mercer County, whereas here we're a little sooner. We're the 8th of October in person at our
Right.
Board of Elections. So a little bit different across state lines, but they're seeing the same amount of voter enthusiasm from what the Board of Elections is seeing on both sides of the aisle. So
And
this
don't
could
forget that you can send a request to the Board of Elections and get a ballot sent to your home. And the first run, if you go to the website of the Board of
Right.
Elections, you can actually have a ballot.
yeah. Just watch those deadlines. They're soon.
Another thing
So,
that I
yeah,
want to say
but
about
yes.
that real quick,
Yes.
just in terms of just voter information, because this was just exploited too much the last time around, is that some states count their mail-ins first and some states count them second. And in a closed state, if they're counting the mail-ins second, the results might shift over time, and that's not evidence of wrongdoing.
Ohio is, we count our absentees first.
Right,
Right, you
right.
just-
And
Right.
But
Right.
PA does not.
We do right now. There is a bill on the floor in the General Assembly to change that. House Bill 472.
Why?
You better ask the Republican who's proposing it.
We'll see if that gets any traction. I really appreciate you joining me here.
I don't always agree.
Yeah, here on 21 News. I want to thank you again for joining the 21 News political panel for Decision
Thank you.
2024. Like I said, we are just weeks away, and we are going to continue this with our political panels. Of course, you can watch this on YouTube in its entirety, and you can watch it on WFMJ.com and the 21 News app. If there are any issues, questions that you have that you'd like us panelists to talk about, something you want me to bring up, make sure that you comment on the YouTube comments below or send us an email at news@wfmj.com. Again, just weeks away. So great to have you here in the studio.
Make
Thank you.
sure that they check their voter registration status and get out to vote.
And if you go to the Board of Elections website, Mahoning County Board of Elections, you can actually see, am I registered to vote? It comes up.
All right.
And it'll pull up where you to go vote.
Okay.
You get everything you need.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.